Welcome to the Gavel. Let's take a look at what Parliament was up to this past week. I'm Terry Ikumi. Now, expectedly, federal lawmakers reacted to the Abia State High Court's judgment, which directed the Attorney General to delete Section 84, subsection 12 from the Electoral Act. Now, that clause says political appointees cannot participate in voting in party primaries or congresses unless they resign 30 days prior. Lawmakers in both the Senate and House of Representatives were furious while debating the matter. They described the situation as an intrusion of the court into the constitutional responsibility of lawmaking, which the National Assembly is saddled with. Long story short, the National Assembly is headed to the appeal court and will petition the National Judicial Council. Here are the details of the deliberations. The Senate chamber was once again scanty on Tuesday, a situation which is becoming more frequent as several senators continue to be absent at plenary sessions, despite reducing sitting days from 3 to 2 days weekly since 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out in Nigeria.
Mr. Senate President.
Notwithstanding the scanty chamber, plenary went ahead. Senator George Sekibo drew the attention of his colleagues to a recent judgment by a federal high court in Umuahia, nullifying the provisions of Section 84, subsection 12 of the newly signed Electoral Act. The section requires political appointees at any level participating in party primaries and conventions to resign 30 days before participating in such activities.
Mr. President, I come under these orders because of a judgment that was delivered in Abia State, I think just last week. That's why I'm coming with this order. I don't have anything against the judge, but Mr. President, the difference, what the man is relying on in his judgment is not the interpretation of the Constitution. The Constitution defines for us who is a civil servant and who is a public servant. It does not include political appointees. It does not. More so, Section 4 gives us the power to make good laws. And in our mind and our mindset, any law we are making here is a good law. Now, Section 228 gives us also the power to make certain laws to guard the independent National Electoral Commission so that it can effectively discharge our function. If in course of our job, and we felt that Section 8412, as we enshrined in the Independent Electoral Act that was just assented to, is for the good interest of the country, of the people, I don't think that we should just be somebody will go to court without joining the Senate or the House of Representatives where this law emanates from, because we originate the law before the president ascended to it.
The Senate eventually stepped down debate on the proposed motion till the following day. Meanwhile, the matter was raised in the House of Representatives the following day. Lawmakers viewed the ruling of the High Court in Abia State as a breach of their legislative privilege and questioned why the National Assembly was not copied in the suit.
The Constitution was talking about employed public servant or civil servant in federal appointment or in state appointment. It did not in any way look at the political appointees and their future and their attempt to participate in the electoral process of this country. In the wisdom of the legislature, crafted that in order to address and to give level playing ground for all participants. That was the wisdom of the legislature, and that was exactly what this judgment is saying, that the court cannot interpret what the legislators do not intend. And our intention here was only to address the issue of political appointees.
In the Constitution, where there is separation of powers, and where we have been made by the provision of the Constitution for us to make laws, that somebody is trying to do our job, I had expected that whatever that the judiciary would do is to interpret, and in the course of interpretation, can still refer back to the National Assembly to say, please, do this, but not asking that the executive to do the job of the National Assembly. So that offends the spirit of separation of power. So I felt that this House should look into it and condemn it in its entirety, and also raise an issue, possibly, apart from appealing this judgment, also write a petition to NJC, because it's an infringement on our body as an institution that should have and enjoy that issue of separation of power.
Whatever decision or whatever wisdom this very court in question took to really effect the judgment they effected against an innocent institution, the legislature today, doing our noble job, the job that we are naturally elected to do, and no other person can do that, is to say the least an aberration. And I want to say that members of this institution must rise against this aberration. We are not only lawmakers, we must be custodians of laws, and laws must have to be obeyed in this country. We are running a system that should have respect for every other institution. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, we must have to make a very strong statement and condemn this action. I am not a lawyer, and I have said I have not seen any other lawyer, even on the street, even the pocket lawyers you find on the street. I've never seen anyone alluding to the judgment of this very erroneous court. Mr. Speaker, it is on this note that I want to say that yes, we have to appeal this judgment, and we also have to reflect to whoever was responsible for that judgment. We must let them understand that when you have a system with the rules guiding the system, then you cannot shortchange the system.
The Speaker guided the House to take a stand on the matter.
You cannot touch a piece of legislation unless it is done by those who have the constitutional authority to do so. And it's on this premise, on those grounds, without even going to the merits, which is what we sought to do, was to differentiate between public service and political appointee. But it is on all these grounds and a lot more that I think it behoves on this House, on the National Assembly, however we're going to do it, to appeal this judgment and have it set aside. It is important, not for anything, but for the sake of posterity and for the records. It's not for us, it's for the institution, it's for posterity, and it's for the records. The NBA has spoken, several lawyers have spoken, and I think perhaps at best, let me say, a mistake was made. I would not want to ascribe anything other than a mistake was made, and mistakes are made. It is now for us to correct that mistake. And I don't think it is right that anyone will foreclose the right of appeal. So I will, from this bully pulpit here, like they say, appeal to the Attorney General to tarry and not usurp or go into the functions, legitimate constitutional functions of the National Assembly, because apparently he intends to carry out the order of the court. I will appeal from here that the Attorney General should stop and desist for now and not foreclose the constitutional right of appeal and allow the law to be settled so that we can in future say it is settled law that such and such and such. Right now, it is not settled law. And that is my appeal, and I will convert this matter, by the powers in me, I will convert this privilege to a motion.
Leader of the Senate.
Meanwhile, in the Senate, the debate continued from the previous day as senators told the line of the Green Chamber to file an appeal.
Since finally believes further that letting the judgment to go without concern will become a precedent on which any person could go to the court and obtain judgment to ridicule the good intentions of the National Assembly as an institution.
Senate resolves to appeal the judgment in suit marked FHC UMC CS 26/2022 for the court to set aside the judgment.
The National Assembly questions the grounds on which the judgment was given and why it was done far away from the Federal Capital Territory where the main parties are based. Now, across the country, power supply has gone worse and has affected the cost of everything in the country. The Minister of Power last week did say the national grid collapsed and was recovered, but not much of an improvement has been observed with power supply. While the House Committee on Power had an interaction with the Minister of Power, the minister was represented by the Permanent Secretary. And in the end, lawmakers concluded that the ministry had gone to sleep on the matter. Take a listen.
The House of Representatives Committee on Power met with the Ministry of Power to unravel the circumstances surrounding the epileptic power supply and perpetual darkness in some parts of the country. The Ministry of Power was represented by the Permanent Secretary, who gives an overview of the current state of electricity supply across the country.
Despite improvements in power generation under this administration, to a peak generation of 5,800 megawatts last year, an average available generation of 5,000 megawatts, recent events have seen a temporary crash in generation by about 1,600 megawatts. This loss is now gradually being recovered, even as we speak, and the situation is stabilized to better serve the growing power demand in the country.
His submission didn't go down well with the committee, as members expressed concern that no part of it showed how the ministry is addressing the power supply challenge.
We were told severally that we have 30,000 megawatts capacity in this country. Our problem was transmission and distribution. Today we have no transmission, no generation. So where is the balance of the 25,000 production?
We are talking of what is happening now. Why is it that we don't have light? But now all what you are telling us is projection. But what we are saying now, we have power plants like Egbin, which is the highest generating plant. What is the situation? Is it gas? These are the issues we want to know. Like Chairman said, we thought you will have a situation room where you can see what is going on. Is it transmission problem, distribution problem, generation problem? If it is generation, now even our hydro plants like the Kayenji, like Shiroro, what is happening now? Even in your speech you said low water. So what is happening now? At what capacity are they running now?
They also queried the power generation and privatization agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the Ministry of Power is in charge. Either the federal government will look at the whole agreement, even though the president himself lamented that he made an agreement that this government cannot tamper with. And we don't know what the ministry is doing. We know there is a great deal of work that was done on our grid. A lot of money was spent by TCN, the former MD TCN. We knew how much he has gotten from ADB and other donors. And we know how much work has been done on the grid. And I don't see why, when you don't feed the grid, it will collapse.
These are figures verifiable. I just got the information on today's generation from TCN.
Excellent.
As of today, we are on 3,582 megawatts. So between last week, when this system collapse happened, and now, with all this our intervention, we've brought back about 1,000 megawatts back to the grid.
The committee was still dissatisfied and insisted that the minister should appear in person to state clearly the measures put in place to improve power generation and distribution.
Welcome back to the Gavel. Let's run through some motions taken in both chambers of the National Assembly. First, lawmakers reacted to the treatment of Nigerians in Indonesia, as well as the alleged maltreatment of Nigerians by foreign employers in Nigeria. Our next report has that and more.
As a matter of personal explanation, the leader of the House, Alhassan Ado Doguwa, briefed the House on his interactions with aggrieved women and civil society organizations at the entrance of the National Assembly on Tuesday, March 22, 2022. The women, he stated, applauded what they know his cognizant efforts of the House of Representatives to be indeed gender-friendly and therefore agreed to suspend the protest following the commitment and assurance of the House to deal with the issue within 7 legislative days.
These distinguished and respected women from different constituencies of the country, sir, respected the words of this House through the delegation that I led to address them. They vacated the streets and they insisted to have a word or two from me that they will now take home as a commitment from the National Assembly, from the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, it's on that note that I want to convey to this House under your watch an able 2IC chief of your Deputy Speaker, Right Honorable Ahmed Idris Wase, that we gave them a commitment that we will revert to them and make sure we do something about their outcries, about their appeal within 7 legislative days.
Honorable Nkyoka, the Deputy Chief Whip, you're one of the people that has been championing this cause. Can you please arrange a meeting with the representatives of the women, the leaders of the women, with me in the office sometime next week, which you and I will agree on what time, but next week, so that we can agree on certain things, particularly the particular date when we'll be bringing. So they'll meet with me and the leadership of the House, including the Deputy Speaker, who would then be able to tell us for the fact when that matter will come up on the floor, because they're still working.
The House of Representatives is urging the federal government and the relevant agencies to construct an injection substation at Igbo Ora and Igongong, Oyo State. This follows a motion by Representative Ajibola Marina. The House says it is aware that access to electricity facilitates sustainable economy and social growth in rural or semi-urban areas. The House also mandated the committees on appropriation, finance and power to include the construction of 3311 kVA injection substation at Igbo Ora in Igbarakpa Central Local Government and 3311 kVA injection substation at Igongong in Igbarakpa North Local Government of Oyo State in the 2023 budget.
The House is concerned that the electricity supply in the entire Igbarakpa land has been epileptic due to the poor electrical installations, prompting the people to migrate to the city as a result of consequent decline in social economic activities and access to basic facilities. The House is cognizant of the need to construct a 33/11 kVA injection substation, each at Igbora and Iganga in the Igbarakpa North Local Government area of Oyo State to facilitate electricity supply and enhance socio-economic activities in the area.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the House received a motion on the urgent need to address the violation of human rights and unfair treatment of Nigerians in Indonesia. Representative Linda Ikpeazu, who moved the motion, was concerned that despite various efforts of the heavy-handedness of Indonesian security and law enforcement officers towards Nigerians that have led to allegations of illegal arrests, detention, tortures, extortions and other unreported fundamental human rights breaches, nothing has been done to reverse the unfortunate and unsavory trend. The House resolved to mandate the committees on diaspora and foreign affairs to investigate the allegations and report back within 4 weeks.
Aggrieved by the recently reported death of late Arinze Igweike on March 14, 2022, a bright and promising native of Onitsha, who was allegedly arrested in Jakarta by Indonesian immigration police for unidentified offenses and eventually died in police custody without any proceedings being brought against him.
In the meantime, Senator Smart Adeyemi is calling on the federal government to fix the comatose oil refineries in the country or build new ones. Senator Adeyemi, who made the call during a press briefing at the National Assembly, says the country's refineries must be made functional or new ones put in place to prevent huge capital flight bleeding the economy from the importation of refined crude oil. He also wants the federal government to fast-track the completion of Ajaokuta Steel Project, lamenting that the abandoned steel complex, which has the potential of providing employment to over 50,000 Nigerian youths, should be resuscitated if full-fledged industrialization is to be achieved in the country.
Which nation on earth will have crude oil and be importing finished products? It is just inexplicable for me. At times I get disturbed, I get perplexed, I get worried that what is wrong with our nation? Today we should be smiling that the crude oil, the barrel, is now selling above $100. It is not out of place to see shout on our government and call on our president that in the name of God, President Muhammadu Buhari, whatever it will take, we must make sure our refineries are functioning. We must make sure that if it's not functioning, let us award contract and build new refineries.
Our final report looks at committee engagement. We focus on the House committees on privatization and host communities. Take a listen.
The House of Representatives Committee on Privatization and Commercialization has directed the Federal Ministry of Transportation to renew expired lease agreements for 5 terminal operators in 2 weeks. The chairman, House Committee on Privatization and Commercialization, Kolade Akinjo, gave the ultimatum after a resolution passed by the committee at a stakeholders' investigative hearing. Representatives of the Ministry of Transport, officials of the Nigerian Ports Authority (NPA), Bureau of Public Enterprises (BPE), Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission (ICRC), as well as the MDAs, CEOs of the 5 terminals with expiring leases appeared before the committee over the matter. The ministry had been given 2 weeks to conclude and forward approval for the execution and signing of the 5 supplemental agreements which leases have expired.
You have to, within 14 days, captured all the things capturable, including certificate of no objection, and of course the what you refer to as that the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, all these 14 days, it must be completed. 2, that MPA, BP, and affected terminals of terms and conditions sign the new supplemental agreement in respect of the 5 renewals and report back to the committee in 2 weeks.
Meanwhile, continuing its investigation of the vessel explosion which occurred in Delta State last month, the House Committee on Host Communities is accusing the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission and the Nigerian Maritime and Safety Agency, NIMASA, of neglect.
This House, you are aware of this motion. The motion is to the extent that the DG NIMASA must appear in person. It must appear in person before this committee in the next hearing. It is very clear. He has no reason whatsoever. This is the second time he's not appearing. The next sitting of this committee, he must, because he has a wonderful role to play.
The lawmakers also asked relevant agencies of government and stakeholders to reach out to the communities affected. In the meantime, following the passage of a bill for an act to establish the Niger Delta Institute of Technology and Skills Acquisition through second reading, Representative Dom Deco explains its importance to the advancement of technology in the country.
The Institute, by His grace, will provide the opportunity for those who wish to be trained to acquire several skills, which will be technology-based and all of that. And they're going to award certificates, diplomas, and also, by the grace of God, degrees. And rather than Nigerians travel overseas to acquire some of these skills, I believe we can get those skills in that school when it's put in place.
Well, we anticipate your feedback or questions. Send an email to thegavel@channelstv.com. And that's it this week on The Gavel. I am Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.